what the Constitution says. States' rights. You hear this heralded all the time. Pull down that big centralized government. Government bad. Let's look at the Tea Party and where the majority of caucus members come from by region in this country. All right, from the east. How many you think? Northeast. 2% Tea Party caucus members are found in the east. All right. From the west, 16% Tea Party members. From the Midwest, a little larger, 19%. But from the South, Mike, from Dixie, wow, 63% of the Tea Party caucus members reside in
a big surprise.
southern states.
I'm rolling my eyes when I say that. Yeah, that's a big surprise.
Isn't that interesting? Where the Tea Party is the strongest, it's down in the Confederate states, as they would be known. And the majority of Tea Party members in the House and in the Senate are from these southern states, by far. So you see where the concentration of the Tea Party is. You see the mentality of the Tea Party. It's the Confederate separatist, our way, not your way. Washington government is the North government. It's Lincoln's government, not our government. Believes in this Neo-Confederate idealism. Separatism. Bring down the North. Bring down centralized government. Shut it down. There are a lot of Tea Party members and kooks out there saying, hey, yeah, shut the government down. That's what we need. They don't understand how the government runs. They don't understand the effect on real people it's going to have. They don't care. It's not in their heart to care. They're separatists. They're Neo-Confederates. This is the heart and soul and root of the Tea Party. It's not the idea of breaking away from a tyrannical king in England, like we think about the historic Tea Party up there in Boston. It has nothing to do with that.
Nope.
Though in their distorted mind, they think it does.
Oh,
Let's
yeah.
break
Don't
away.
tread on me, using the old flag
Yes.
to try and make their opponent. Yeah, right.
They are anarchists. In heart and soul, the Tea Party, this Neo-Confederate movement, are anarchists who want to pull down the government. Now, if you listen to this show, Mike and I, we do have criticisms. As citizens born and raised here in this country, we have a right to speak our mind.
Mm-hmm.
First Amendment, freedom of speech. And yeah, we're not going to sit by when we see abuses going on. We're going to call it out. Now, we don't want to bring down the government. We want to see improvements made. We want to hold the politicians' feet to the fire and try to get them to do it right. Realizing it's never going to be done right, but hey, that's the battle, right?
Yep.
That's the fight, the good fight.
Mm-hmm.
Not to tear down the government and have anarchy and chaos. And without government, let's face it, without government, without authority, what would we have? We'd have what we
chaos.
had. Chaos, yeah. Or what we had here in the West, way back when there wasn't really any government out here, was the Wild West, right?
Mm.
Everybody makes their own law. Hey, I don't like the way you looked at me. Pow, you're dead.
Yeah.
Hey, I like your cattle. Pow, you're dead. I take them. You know, you have chaos. Life is outlaw. We don't want that. And guess what? For all those Southerners down there in the Bible Belt, God doesn't want that. This anarchist idea, this Neo-Confederate Tea Party idea, is against God. So you're being a hypocrite if you're going to church and calling yourself a Christian, and you're following this Neo-Confederate idea. Why do I say this? Let's look at the book of Romans, written by the Apostle Paul to the Rome at the time. Rome was a very powerful government. It was the world's government for the most part. And they were very oppressive. Okay? If you did something wrong, they crucified you on a cross. That was a typical way of condemning somebody to death. Chapter 13, Paul writes this to the Christians, how they should behave. Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there are no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of authority? Do what's good, and you will have praise from the same. For he is God's minister to you for good. But if you're evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain, for he is God's minister, an avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. As we're saying, if we have no authority, there's no one to keep the peace. Now, does human authority do this perfectly? No. Because we're all sinners and we're all imperfect. But God has set up this idea of government to be over people, to generally keep the peace and keep the chaos under control. Because out on our own, we're going to have utter chaos. Therefore, you must be subject not only because of the wrath, but also for consequence sake. For because of this, you also pay taxes. For they are God's ministers, attending continually to do this very thing. Render, therefore, all due, taxes to whom is due, customs to whom is due, fear to whom is fear, honor to whom is honor. God even tells us, pay the taxes. I set up governments in the world, generally speaking. Did he set up Nazism? No. That was man's sin running amok in a form of a government. And God used other nations to judge them and bring them down. Did not that happen? Yes. But generally speaking, governments are set up to keep the peace and keep the chaos in check. And he says, if you're doing good, generally, you're going to be okay in a government. If you go out to do crimes, you're going to be judged. And that is my way of keeping peace for you people on earth. The idea of government came from God. Now, do people mess it up? Yes. And it's the public who needs to keep the authorities in check. And we've always understood this in this democracy, right?
Yep.
But now we have this radical right-wing Neo-Confederate Tea Party movement that is trying to drag the country down, even trying to secede from the Union. Shut down is good. And it's gone to the extreme because there's always a racist element in it in the South. Because they always viewed blacks as subhumans. That's why they could buy and trade and sell and kill or whip or whatever. And now we got a black in the White House. So it just sent them apoplectic. And that's why they're willing to go to these extremes. It's time for the rest of the nation who doesn't believe this way, which is the vast majority of Americans, to wake up and say, no more. We're not going to be held hostage to the Neo-Confederate Tea Party group. We know who you are. We know what you're trying to do. This country is not perfect by any means. Never has been. But you know what? We need the government. We have the best form of government on earth. And we need to work to try to keep it getting better, but not to drag it down to the detriment of everybody living here.